Hi guys, I'm Dan at vintagevello.org and today it's Restomod Day. Yes, we are going to be starting our Restomod project. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term Restomod, restoration modification. Now, what that means is you're taking an old school steel frame and you're adorning it with some of the latest components. Now, not to be confused with upgrades, okay? If you take a nice 8-speed with downtube shifters and you change it on to like 9-speed STI, for many that will be an upgrade and probably a good one. But it's not really in the realm of Restomod. Restomod, it's a bit more of a walk on the wild side. Just literally kind of like the sky's the limit here. So the plan here, we've got a rather neat lugged steel Moser frame. It's a Moser Corsa from the mid 80s, and we are going to get building this up with Di2 Shimano electronic shifting, some rather awesome wheels, carbon for it's just kind of okay for the purists. Turn away now. For everyone else, carry on watching because it's kind of cool. Now, first things first. Just a couple of kind of boundaries that you'd need to be aware of when you're working or planning on a Restomod. First up, plan. A lot of issues, a lot of little problems come up when you are matting new technology onto old frames. And there are things you need to consider first off. Firstly, the frame selection. Don't go for a pile of junk. Obviously, these aren't cheap things to do. Secondly, it needs to be steel, aluminium and carbon. Chances are we're going to end up spreading this rear triangle here, and aluminium and carbon don't spread in the same way. So, if in doubt, steel all the way. Also, nothing too old with your steel. By that I mean 50s, 60s, maybe 70s. The reason being, it comes down to brakes. And how the brakes mount. Now, from literally 1980 onwards, pretty much every decent frame manufacturer had a recessed Allen bolt used on the forks and the brake bridge at the rear to mount the brakes. Before that, the bolt goes through and the nut goes on the end of the bolt and it's exposed. Now, modern brakes aren't long enough to do that, so you really need to go with a frame that's equipped with that kind of recessed aluminium fitting. Otherwise you're in a world of hurt, or you've got to use old school brakes, which kind of goes against the idea of a Restomod. But this one here, it's been selected mainly because I had it. It's a really neat frame and I've had it for a few years and I had no idea what to do with it. And to be fair, I watched Alex on GCN build up that rather nice orange Pinarello with full latest Di2, and it got me thinking, like, I kind of fancy doing something like that. And I was looking around on eBay, looking at all sorts of frames, and I thought, hang on a moment, I've got that really nice blue and white Moser frame. Now, with these kind of things, also, your steerer tube here, if possible, you really want the 1.25 inch. This is a 1 inch down steerer tube, which is a little bit of an issue, so it's not quite as stiff. The 1.25 inch are definitely stiffer, opens up your options on your head stems as well. But taking that into account, I am fitting a full look HSE carbon stem on here, which is much stiffer than the original steel. And I'm going to be converting it into a headset as well, so we can use much more modern componentry up front. Now, also, as I said, with Restomods, the sky's the limit. There are no rules with Restomod. That's a great thing about it. And the paint on this, it's still in its original paint, but it was a bit flat, a little bit dull. So I thought this needs a little something. So I figured I would, while I'm playing around with some paint, I would colour coordinate quite a few of the parts, the seat post, the head stem, The bars and the fork I have colour coded, and I've also added a lovely lush bit of silver pearl with a clear coat over the top. Love a bit of silver pearl. If you've got a bit of a flat old frame and you want to lift it up, okay, silver pearl does a great job, makes it nicely metallic, and on this it's come out brilliantly. I'm really happy. It's also a reason why I haven't got this clamped down too hard, because it's still a little bit fresh. Now, where do you start? The start is obvious. Once you've formulated that plan and you've collected all of your parts and you've kind of checked that most of it will fit, okay, chances are our first issue is the rear dropouts. Okay, simple reason, this one here is a 126mm rear dropout spacing. At the very least, you need 130. Okay, now, two ways around this. On this, it's quite soft actually. I could just about get that wheel in. I think, if I'm honest, I suspect this had a 130 on here for some time on the rear, and it's kind of semi-spread itself. But this one seems to be set about 128, so it has naturally spread a little bit over time. But we need to take this out just a little bit more so as that back wheel comes in and out. Now, spreading a rear triangle, bending. Okay, we're just going to bend this rear triangle to take a bigger wheel. And obviously steel, that's the material that bends nicely. That's why we can't use carbon, and aluminium's out because of the risk of cracking. Okay, so steel's the kind of thing. Oh, by the way, this one here is made of Araya TT. It's kind of like basically Reynolds 531. And the sizing fitting are all pretty much the same. So we're going to spread this rear triangle by 2 or 3 mil. And I will take you through that process. Now, it's really not that hard. If in doubt, your local bike shop should be able to do it, or a specialist, but it isn't as hard as it sounds. Let me just show you how we do it. So all I've done is just popped in this bit of threaded bar, a couple of nuts on there and a couple of massive washers set in between the dropouts, and the nuts are on the inside here. And all I'm going to do is do those up or out so as it just slowly spreads this rear triangle. I've just measured it, measuring in at 127.5 at the moment. You've got to take a bit further than 130. I imagine I've probably got to take this out to 140, but the trick is take it out a bit, back it off, measure it, spread it in a bit, back it off, measure a bit. Just take it easy. You don't want to go too far on this kind of thing, and just see how you go. So that's what we're going to do now. Squeamish, look away now, but for everyone else, just kind of look on and wonder how well this is or isn't going to work. Okay, the first go there, I took it out to 140 wide, and it is now spread to about 128 on here. So I'm just going to go ahead now, do it again, maybe take it to 145-ish, and then see where we're at. Like I said, take it easy. There's no rush with this. Take your time. You just don't want to go too far. Obviously, don't want to hear any cracking noises, but do listen out. So now that's the rear triangle spread and set up, we can go ahead with the rest of the build. We're going to pop the forks on here. One thing about forks, quite often, usually on your vintage steel frame, you're going to have a 1-inch steerer. If you can go for a 1 1/4 frame or on the steerer, that's better. It's a bit stiffer. That's the reason why they're all 1 1/4 now. But we have a 1-inch steerer on here. So I have gone ahead and I'm going to fit these. Again, working on the fact there are no rules when it comes to Restomod. I have these really neat, and yes, I've colour coded them and decaled them, but that is a Look HSE fork in full carbon. Weighs very little, but it's very stiff, and that's going to help stiffen up our front end with the more modern components. Obviously, if we were using original forks and everything, we didn't want it a bit wavy, then go ahead, use your original forks, but you'll see with the wheels and stuff that are going to go on here in a bit, I wanted it a bit more radical, so carbon forks throughout up front. But what that does also mean is that it's threadless, so we need to change, I've changed the headset to a threadless headset, and I'm also going to use a head stem conversion as well, which I'll show you in just a moment. This is again part of the thing, plan everything. think about it all, because there's lock-on effects throughout, but I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. Now I've put in a headset conversion on here. Using a headset stem opens up an awful lot of future swap out options for bars, that kind of thing, and it is stiffer than a quill stem, so we want stiffness and a bit of lightness, and when you're doing it, it's very simple. They come with a couple of spacers, shims that you fit in there that open it out. Make sure your gap is at the back, and then all you have to do is tighten up the top nut, just to take up a bit of preload, to make sure you've got it all in the right position. Make sure that's all nice, and then 2 bolts, just do those up. That nips it all up nice and tight, and then we're ready to carry on. I think we'll get the bars on there. So bars and stem now on there. I've purposely not done up anything tight yet, because obviously we've got freshly painted parts on here, and when we clamp these up, it's going to bite in a bit, so I'm being a bit cautious on here. But of course, great thing with doing a Restomod is that you can paint stuff up as you go, and really, like, your imagination is your limit here. So I kind of went for the colour coding. I also colour coded the seat post just here, but you'll notice a couple of little modifications. Now I'm using Di2 10-speed, and that has an external mounted battery. And in fact, I'm going to be using the external cabled version on this as well, because it's a lot more straightforward. And as we've got external cable mounts on this frame, I figured, what the hell, stick with external. But I wanted to move the battery. Traditionally it would be sat here on a Di2 10-speed, but I wanted to move it and tuck it away underneath the seat post here. You can actually convert Di2 10-speed to the more familiar 11-speed hidden battery that goes up inside the seat post, but you do have to change your junction box at the same time, and I just didn't want to do that, too much of a faff. So all I've done is I've just extended the cable, soldered in some extra cable, so as this will just run down through there, pop out through the drain holes in the bottom bracket, and then I've relocated my battery up here a little bit. So we'll just go and pop this in there. Then I'm gonna have to get my head around some cabling. Now that's already starting to look pretty wild. Now, because I've got a fresh coat of pearl and lacquer on here, I've gone ahead and I've actually clamped onto the seat to give it a tighter clamp, because I don't want to bite through any of that fresh lacquer at this stage. And also, yeah, if you are ever painting a rear seat post, hone out your seat post before you go and try and put it in, and obviously measure up before you clamp up. Chances are you're going to bite through your paint there as well when you clamp that up. So I've just done it up tight enough to hold it for the moment, and yeah, I honed that out beforehand. So hopefully, you know, we've got the most chance of keeping the paint on there. Going to go ahead now. Now this is this little contraption here is the lower junction box. Now this is an externally mounted one, so it just bolts up underneath the BB, and in fact, using this system, the good thing was I only had to drill one little hole in the bottom bracket to take a like a little 5mm bolt with a thread on, just to clamp this up on the underside, because everything else is externally mounted. So no drilling holes through the frame, which, you know, I'll do, but maybe I want to avoid it. I did drill one little hole just at the back there of the stem to get that in there, but there's plenty of metal meat in there, so that's nothing to worry about. And this is all pretty neat. It kind of, you can configure it around and take slack out and do all sorts. So I'm going to go ahead now and put this in there and maybe start scratching my head as to what the next bit is. And connected up the battery cable to the rear junction box, take that all up, and then I have popped the spare line back up inside the down tube here. I put connectors on there because just in case I want to get it out and change any of this, I can just pull those connectors out, because I know there's some in there. Oddly enough, these externally mounted junction boxes do not come apart. They are completely sealed, so you can't pop in and out your wiring like that. It doesn't really work. Certainly not on Di2 10-speed. So that's why I had to go ahead and do that one. But I'm now going to go ahead and connect up my front junction box here with the rear junction box, and I've popped popped the Dura-Ace STI levers on here as well. I'll just get you in close, just show you how these ones work. Oddly enough, the 10-speed Dura-Ace has a different connection fitting from pretty much all the other Di2s and Ultegras. Make sure you get the right stuff. So that's the cabling nicely tucked away inside the frame. I can go ahead now and install the bottom bracket. Being a much younger Di2 system, we have externally cupped bearings. And again, good idea if you can. Italian threaded frames make life a lot easier to track down these kind of bits. Obviously this has the kind of like little plastic cup here, cover for inside, and that stops any cabling kind of wrapping around any of the moving parts, because the actual bottom bracket just slides through there. And handily, I'll be honest, these things, it tells you whether it's left or right hand side, and it also tells you your direction to tighten it in. It makes it a lot easier to avoid that risk of crossing threads or putting the wrong thread in, really. And, those kind of things, it happens now and again. So these kind of easy. We like it. We'll go ahead and pop it in there. Now, one of these things you encounter with these kind of builds, being an old school steel frame, this one is a band-on front derailleur mount. This is a braze-on. So I picked up one of these that just clamps around, but of course, it's the wrong size for the tube. This is a later, I think it's a 31.8, so it's for a wider tube. One of those things, back on the drawing board, find the right part, get it ordered up in the right size this time, and yeah. Had a handful of delays. Also decided I wanted white cabling on here, not black. Don't ask me why. It's one of those things I've been thinking about. So I've just had to reorder that as well. So, these things, these builds, take your time, get it right, order the right bits, maybe first time. I'm certainly not ordering another one of these. They cost a fortune. Now, it's been a couple of weeks since you saw this last. Now got the white brake cables on here. They do definitely suit the frame much better. And I also now have the correct proprietary Shimano front derailleur clamp on there. It's a really nice little thing, actually. It's got a nice rubber insert in there, so it clamps on nicely without the need to over tighten. It's actually quite a neat little thing. I've gone ahead, I've popped the front and rear derailleurs on, and now I'm going to connect up those cables and start tidying up some of this front end here, bits and bobs like that. And then we'll get some bar tape on there. I think it's going to start to come together quite quickly from here. Now that's that front end all tidied up. Cables are tucked away neatly. Bar tape is on there. It's starting to come together really well. Wheelset. Let me introduce you to these. Head Jet 6040s. No messing around with your Wheelset on a Restomod. Plenty of people out there do put alloys on there. That's absolutely fine. But I think if you're gonna do it, go the whole way. These are not subtle, but then again, a steel frame with Di2 is not a subtle build anyway. It's going to turn heads, it's going to create a lot of conversation, so I have gone with these. Reason being, head wheels are awesome. They are really well made. I get an alloy braking surface, which I like a lot, some carbon parts. They're light but not crazy light, but also stainless steel spokes, some cool detailing that's going to suit the bike, and also, like really current modern wheels, they have these are clinchers, and they're quite a wide internal bead depth. Width, sorry. So what that means is, although these tyres, and they were on here new from the previous owner, so normally I would swap them out onto Veloflex, but I'm going to leave these on there because they're new, and they've got that nice kind of tacky feel to them. But these are 23s on here, and on a Restomod build, you're kind of going forward in time to current standards. But because these are clinchers and they're wide, I've measured them, they actually come out closer to 26-27mm, not 23. And that is important, obviously, because as the width of the rim width goes up, so your overall diameter of your tyre goes up. And there is potential issues here again, and it's going to come onto your brakes. Now, this being a full-on Moser race bike, we haven't got a problem. But if you start to get more kind of touring in your geometry, you often find that the brake bridge is set slightly higher up on a steel bike. And that means that the brake calipers, they're not a long enough reach for the pads to get onto your braking distance. I believe, and I may be wrong here, often am, I think Ultegra did a long reach brake caliper that can kind of get you out of trouble if that does happen to you. But certainly on Dura-Ace, they are really short. You don't have a lot to play with. I've test fitted these. I know these fit on here, no problem, but it is something to be concerned with. Also, you know, just because you might be able to cram in a 25 that effectively makes it 30, or even a 28 that probably make it effectively a 32 mil, it's going to be really tight fitting it in this frame. And when you're giving it some full gas efforts, maybe out of the saddle on a climb, you're going to get some flex. Steel frames do flex without a doubt. They flex a lot more than carbon frames. It's one of the reasons why they feel so nice and comfortable to ride. But what it does mean is if you really go with that like wafer thin gap, chances are on that out of the saddle effort, you're going to get a rub going on somewhere. So don't go crazy with your clearances. So that's the reason why I have stuck with these. But we're going to put this on there now. And then it's time for chains and some final setups. So there we have it. That is the steel frame Moser Restomod complete, resplendent with its full Dura-Ace Di2 10 speed on here and those rather epic head jet 6040s. It went together really pretty well. There were, of course, a handful of issues with fit. You're always going to get that when you're marrying old school steel with new parts. But, you know, just be patient, work your way through them. The overall result, I am really, really happy with. I got a few little tweaks and adjustments to make, seat height, things like that. I also overlooked the reach problems that you do get with Di2 shifters. They go out a lot further than regular shifters do. So that's one thing. I've got, I think, a 130 stem on there at the moment. I may have to spray up a 110 just to bring it back a little bit, but I'm going to see how it goes when I'm out there riding this. On the subject of riding, I am booked in for that Winter Sportive Hell of the Ashdown we did at the beginning of this year. It's February sometime. I think this bike should go there. It's the perfect ride, obviously with the having Di2, the compact chain set, and I think at the back here we've got 11 to 27. Who'd have thought? But 1127 on the rear cassette. This is a really good climbing package, so I'm going to look forward to that. Obviously, alloy braking rim also helps a lot in the winter. Weight-wise, now built up, if this was built up with like a 9-speed or 8-speed Dura-Ace with SDI levers up front, I would expect this to be about 9.5 kilo. If I was on down tube shifters on like a 7-speed setup, gets a little bit lighter, about 9.1, 9.2. I've just weighed it with pedals and everything else on here. We are at 8.6, 8.65 kilos. So overall, I'm very happy with that. Obviously, I'd like it to be a bit lower, but with these head jet wheels, they're not the lightest. Okay, so you know, I've given some weight away there, and there's, you know, you could swap various parts out for carbon fibre if you really wanted to, but this I think is spot on, just how I want it. So I hope you enjoyed that. We will get this out there riding soon. I'm just going to wait for some better weather, or in the case of Hell of the Ashdown, worth weather. But in the meantime, do like and subscribe. Some of you may have spotted this very rusty looking old thing in the corner here. We are going to be building that up soon, so do keep watching for anything else that's cool to do with vintage bikes. Thanks a lot.